So here's the greenstone, which is, you know, a mix of about 16 different types of stone that they had to go through to get to the meat of the deposit they were mining. So it's like a jawbreaker. When you break it in half, there's all these rings. The planet's like that. There's all these rings of different geology that gets super compacted, becomes super hard, and now it becomes mantle. And then up on the top surface, the rainwater, the freezing thawing, and the plants start to do extractions. But when you can make it more assimilable, the plants get to feed all year, not just through a certain time of the year. So yeah, we're going to add these different ingredients in to the mix. Here's this is calcium sulfate. That's been, because I moved it around a few times, it picked up some green, it picked up some andesite. But as you can see, plants right in the gypsum set themselves up. Up top, there's trees growing out of the gypsum piles that have been up there for 20 years. And what's there? Birch tree, you know, like, it's interesting, the birch, because it's a pretty fussy tree, and yet it's taken off from the pile. So yeah, so calcium sulfate. Even the cave rock, there's pieces in here, and the cave rock is super tough, and it will break the rock down. And this, like I say, this, once it's wet, it stays wet for a long time. But it's not soaking wet, it's just moist, so the plants are able to extract the water off the dampness, the humidity. But if it's totally dry, that's not happening. So anyway, that's that one. And then, you know, I always add in my mixes, I add a little bit of coconut fiber for the carbon. But again, in the coconut, you see, plants are setting up in that bag. A seed blew in there, and all of a sudden it germinates, even though it's just carbon. But it adds some organic matter and very slow to break down. The coconut shell is very slow to break down, but it doesn't go moldy. So this is used a lot in the growing of cannabis, right? Because it's a nice medium. It's not the same as peat. Peat a lot of times has salt in it, so it dries really quick. And if you don't keep on watering or have mulch, it goes super dry and releases the salt. And that's where sometimes you don't get reactions from compost. Either it hasn't been digested right, or it's still immature. And then I'm going to add some organic compost that I've had here for 15 years. And it's in the bags out there. I'll just grab a pail and I'll shovel some out. Let people can see. So a lot of people, when they make compost, it's black. Where you see this is chocolate brown. You see that? And this was made by the Mennonites using compost turners and monitoring the piles, according to Arden Anderson, all the compost guys out of America that are educating farmers how to make compost. You know, it's the key, because you've got humic acids in there that are waiting to be released, but you need moisture to release them. And then from, you know, my deluxe mixes, I always add a little some azomite, only because we don't have any azomite deposits up here in the north because our volcanoes are so old. This comes from fresh volcanics, so it's coming out of you know, the southwest of America, where it's geologically very young and hasn't matured yet. And like I say, I you know, through the years I've found different sources. This is This is a basalt coming out of South America. You notice it has a little bit of a greeny blue hue.
Okay. Wow.
And we have some green sand here. New Jersey was the first place that had the green sand, but the deposits ran out now because it's been extracted since the 30s. So now they're at a point where they've used up all the zoning that's in that particular area. People say green sand, what do I need green sand? It's a gluconate. So what it does is it creates layering. So it's tissue layering. So in a tree that would be rings, and an onion it would be layers. So it's really, really important to have that gluconate in your soil profile if you want to grow garlic, onions, a lot of things that create big expressions of fruits and vegetables. And this one here is a glacial rock dust out of BC. But look, this one is brown. You gotta remember, our mineral world, when minerals go in their perfection, they create crystals. And then the quality of the doping on the crystal can make it whether it is considered a gem or just a rock. So emeralds, diamonds, rubies, and the like of, like a lot of people wear olivine, which peridot is another name for it. So it's the birthstone for tap, isn't it? Isn't it peridot? And this is some hard rock phosphate out of Tennessee. So you notice a little different tanning in the color?
Yeah. It's like a beige.
This is a little mix, I think, that's coming out of somewhere in Asia. They call it yaori. I'm not sure what it's a phosphorus again too, but there's many types of phosphorus. And here's a deposit out of carbonatite, which is a really nice calcium-potassium mix that's unique to a certain part of northern Ontario. And here we've got a little volcanic aggregate coming from a volcano, again from another part of the world.
An older volcano?
Not a young volcano. We have really old. The Precambrian is old. So it's like the original rock formations that evolved to all the other rocks through time on the history of the planet. So here's a soft rock phosphate out of Florida, and they put a colloidal clay to bind it, and you can get this in flour or pieces. So we got to introduce the clay molecules back into the soil because they transfer the nutrients all around into the bacteria, but also into the plants. Here's some andesite flour. So it's the andesite sand ground into flour. So you see this how this looks like a chunk of rock when you break it off and chip it with a hammer. But it's total powder. but it's organizing itself to show you that geometric expression of the geology itself. So all these different shapes create soil aggregation, because you got a diamond, you got a square, you got an elongated, you got a circle, you have a long stringies, like basalt grows in tubes, and basalt is premature emeralds, the tourmaline family. But again, there's magnetic, paramagnetic basalts, and there's neutrals. So there's a yin and yang in the stone world. But you got to find the right deposits to have the yin and the yang, which makes a circuit, just like a hot wire and a neutral in electricity. So this is some wollastonite out of Kingston, Ontario. And the wollastonite has been used traditionally for making fancy pottery, because when it melts, it makes a very tight matrix. So now your plates they don't break easy. They will break. Mostly they chip first before they break if you mishandle them and they clink them together. And so the oxide is actually ionic. It creates an acid reflex in the soil, even though the calcium's there. But it's the oxide that gets over into the acid side of the fence. But if you use too much of that, your land will tighten right up. Because of that, it gets hot and then it starts to make like a plate, which is now impenetrable. So that's why we need to do the different sizes. So the soil has the ability to flux. And when the rain comes, the particles move and then the water in-soaks. Where if you get a hard pan, the water just moves along the surface to the river, to the ocean, without nourishing the landscape. And all things need water to grow, right? This here is black earth, they call it. This is a soft grade coal that's full of humic acids. But it's not enough of an oil in there to make it as a fuel, to burn it. It won't heat a house, but raw coal will, like wood. But this builds up your protein cycle, because you need the humates to transfer all the elements in the mechanism of the roots in the soil itself. So it's a good one to beef up your soil. A lot of guys are growing grasses and stuff that aren't complete protein, so the animal has to eat it before it gets sedated. And that's where, what we noticed when we did the fields, the animals would eat, and then they'd go lay down and they would chew that cud for a while, because it's so flavorful. And they don't have to eat as much now, right? So, you put your little bit of expense in the land, you get more production, or more life-giving properties to whatever you're doing on that land, whether it's growing trees, animals, eggs, whatever. So it's sort of a really, really important thing to consider. And then we've got, this is a sodium bentonite clay. That's it's bentonite and sodium only. And it's a super fine particle, but it absorbs 10 times its weight in water. So when you've got a little bit in the ground, when it rains, it swells up and the water gets to hang longer before it evaporates. Okay. Now this one here is the calcium bentonite. So these are all, a lot of farmers will dust their seeds up with this, and then they introduce the colloid into the intestinal tract of the animal. Now the animal is able to do its business effortlessly, and also not allow bad bacteria into the system itself, because you have this little impermeable layer that absorbs the toxins, and then they rule out of us when we go do our business. So bentonite's been used traditionally. Like the parrots were the ones that showed us the benefit of bentonite, because they would go to these hills, flocks of parrots, and they're pecking at that cliff, which is a bentonite clay. So they didn't know that intuitively to stay healthy for longer. So, you know, the rock world is formed by many things. Sometimes the ocean contributes, sometimes it's the mountain, and sometimes it's the plain. But I always add some seaweeds into the blends to give us a little bit of iodine, some very assimilable trace elements quickly, but also it creates immunity. So, you know, this has been used traditionally since the 50s to feed the animals during the winter to keep their nutrition up. And also it has a very, very nice smell. This is one out of Korea, which is a mix of five different seaweeds. And I'm big on the North Atlantic seaweeds too, but some of the big guys have captured the market, and so now the little guys aren't being able to get it. The little farmers. So, but the East Coast, you know, like, you've got to remember, finhorn, how did they make finhorn? They were able to create these paradise gardens on the rock cliffs of Scotland. They used the seaweed, they brought the seaweed up from the ocean, threw it on the soil, organic matter, some other things, some good transplanting and taking care of the garden, and were able to grow super vegetables in an area that wasn't known to farm. And people have visited the finhorn forever. And we can make everywhere a finhorn if we start to give back to the earth rather than just use it. Yeah, we were talking earlier about olivine. This is some olivine out of Norway. Norway has some really nice deposits of the magnesium crystal olivine. And now we know that the olivine helps with the sequester of CO2. So in starting to introduce these particles into the soil, they start to transmute some of the pollutions that we've created through modern agriculture and just cityization of the planet. So over here we have some ground down garnets from India. India has the biggest garnet deposit on the planet. And interesting enough, it's in Pune, India, or Pune, which the Maharishi and Osho, that's where they decided to put their temples. And what happens to a garnet is NASA just proved, they know the Earth's always making iron, but it's disappearing. Where's it going? The garnet eats the iron. But it takes on the specific gravity of iron, but doesn't have the rust in there. And also it's a source of pyrope oil. And here in where we were, the green rocks got a little bit of pyrite in there. I mean, not pyrite, a little bit of garnet. And garnet's is a source of pyrope oil. And pyrope oil is a major oil component of chlorophyll. So again, we're starting to enhance the chlorophyll production by introducing mediums that manifest that in the third dimension. And now we're going to do a little garnet. I'm not garnet, Delux. Where to put the scissors?
Here they are.
There we go. Whoop. And there's many deposits of zeolite out there, but not all of them are up to snuff for doing some of the things. So this particular garnet is coming out of the southwest of America, but I also use another garnet, zeolite from Russia. Chapazite is another name for it. The one thing about geology, they've gotten all these different names for rock, but really it's either a volcanic, a sedimentary, or a metamorphic, and depending on what it's doped with mineral-wise in its structure, gives it a new name. But the zeolites absorb toxins and gases, and also lock up poisons. So this is a way of helping detoxify a farm that's been under a lot of chemical inputs through the history. So we can regenerate, but we got to do the certain mediums to regenerate the quality of the soil again. Yeah, and they use zeolites forever for filtering wine, ciders, juices. They'll use diatoms to take a dark ale and make it golden, because the diatoms will grab the color, the tannin out of the liquid. So now we see it change color from that, and it changes the flavor because some of those tannins create strong flavors, aftertaste when you drink the liquid or the wine, and that's the difference between really good wines and cheap wines. Is there's no aftertaste. There's just the palate taste as you're drinking it, and you know, wine is the blood of the earth, so to speak, right? And I also had in some of the cave rock. Where it is. So here's a mix where I just mixed the calcium sulfate with the soft rock phosphate, the andesite flour, and a little bit of humate. So this is sort of like a little starter medium. So you apply that during the winter before the thaw, or just when you can get out in the field again. And when you do your transplanting or your seeding, it really helps the seed grab and take. And then after that, it's a machine. But it's only as strong as the root system from the beginning. So if you have marginal root systems, you get marginal expression of the plant. So this is where we start to see things growing bigger, more yield, quality yield. And you know, everyone knows a good flavor. And where did they go? Because as a young boy, I noticed how the food always had a taste, and then came industrialization of farming conventionally, and we saw the flavor disappear. You got the yield, but the nutrition's not there. So your mineral profiling, when we analyze it, is very poor. Maybe not enough calcium or phosphorus in there to stimulate the human system. And when you eat good food, you don't need it a lot because you get nourished. Where empty groceries, you got to keep socking it back to try to fill yourself up, but you're still not getting satisfied. So that's where a lot of overeating has come from, because your intuitive body's saying, hey, I need the groceries. And the ego says, oh, I gotta eat. So, yeah, so little things that change the world as we know. So here's some diatoms here. Super fluffy, super light. But it's like microscopically looks like a shuriken in Kung Fu, the little stars they throw around, but no two the same. So this is like snow. This is like water droplets. There's no two the same, but yet they can all be a group. be homogeneous. And also it's a natural insecticide. So a lot of the sap suckers and leaf chewers, if you get it on their skin, their exoskeleton, the rock cuts into them and they lose their fluids internally through the outer shell. So it's sort of a friendly way of eliminating, because you're not poisoning the environment, getting rid of your problem. So here's some cave rock here, ground down in the flour. And you notice when it's on its own it's pink, but as soon as we hammer it down it changes color. And that's what a lot of the rocks do. The quartz, the white quartz I use. Well, this is a food grade calcium carbonate that is the original bacteria, the first bodies of the bacteria that started the planet. This is in Perth, Ontario, steep rock calcite. It's known as snow white, as you can see, white as snow, right? And it's super pure, so they use this a lot in the manufacture of plastics, to give plastic stability and for the sun not to be able to eat it. Because you've got a rock in there now, and the rock's resistant to the sun tearing down the structure. So it's a real good one. And then I use another food grade calcium coming out of the Guelph Kitchener area. And that deposit's been used since the 50s for feeding of animals, and they have a clay right beside it that's used in all the professional baseball fields on the lanes, the pitcher's mound and the run lanes for the bases, because it has ability to, you can slide on it, but it has a resistance to get wet. So it doesn't get as mucky as quick as all the other clays. And then there's a sand that they use from Halliburton, Ontario. The grain sign is perfect for volleyball courts. So you're playing the volleyball and you're moving all around, you're never kicking the sand up in your face, because when you go through it, it falls right down again. Another material that does that is aragonite, which is ammonia shells. Which is ammonia shells from the ocean. So you got to remember, there's nitrate shells and ammonia shells. And so anyway, that one is really good for, they use that one in all the professional golf course sand traps. When you go through with your club, the sand will never come up in your face. But if you use crappy sand, the angle of the club shoots it up, and if you're not careful, you get a shot of dust, of sand in your eyes. And so you know, little things that have been used forever, but we don't always hear about, right? Site naturally, but if you use too much, you wipe out all the fungi. The thing is just a little bit, and then that protects the root zones from being attacked by the recycle fungi, not the body producing ones, the takedown crew. People don't realize the mushroom realm, there's a creative and destructive cycles. So one is to nourish life, and the other one is to re-evaluate life, like break it down again to start over. So it's another good one to have. And then yeah, let's see here. Yeah, I have the other deposit, the calcium. It's pink. They've been feeding it to the cows, but it's over by where you're camping. That pile that's all dropped down. That particular calcium can create big-breasted things, right? It seems to talk to the mammillary glands, and you'll get larger breasts. It's interesting, some parts of the world, the women are large-chested, and other parts of the world they're small-chested. So, you know, it has what the calciums you're getting in your milk or your cheese or in your food itself. So we're introducing all these different minerals to help accent different body parts as you grow into an adult from a child. And, yeah. But basically that's sort of, and then we're adding, like I say, the compost in there, a little bit of organic matter. And then as long as you keep this stuff dry after you receive it, it's waiting to be utilized. If it gets wet, it starts to go through a digestion, so we lose the seaweed properties due to the water and some of the other reactions because the water's transmuted it by being in the pile itself. But you know, literally, if you put these in pails, you could pull that pail out 500 years from now and it'll still do the same thing. So it's held up. Just think of the rocks are held up in time, and when we hammer them down, we release the time again, the memory of what that rock was formed from. So some parts of the planet, it was very fertile, and then a calamity happened, an ice age, a flood, a volcano. So it all got covered up. And then through time, it turned into stones that have these magical properties. But not everywhere has that mineral diversity. And basically it's, the plants are like ourselves. We like a banquet. We don't just want to eat rice and beans. We want some fruit. We want some veggies in there. We want to have a more fiber and move all the other things through us. And again, one of the benefits of all this, you're creating biomass. And biomass is nature's rug. When you have biomass, the rain doesn't wash the soil away because it can't tear apart the doormat. Just like this woven mat here that we use, you know, what's that? Coconut fiber, right? Lasts a long time. Very good for kind of washing your shoes off if you rub them a bit, so you can stop dirt from entering your house. Think of, we're creating this as well through the biomass. And I know when I was living in Brooklyn there in Whitby, and I worked a decade with the forest, when I first started I had 1 inch of biomass. So people say, well, how do you know it's biomass? You grab a shovelful and you shake it and see what root mass is left. That's your biomass. So I went from 1 inch to 10 inches in a decade. The Japanese say it takes 300 years to make an inch. So we were able in a decade to do 300 years worth of geological evolution. Does that not mean something? We want to clean our waters up and stuff. We need the biomat to do that. Why? Well, the roots release hydrogen, and hydrogen cleans the water. And also tells the trees to shoot for the heavens, so the plants to climb up to the sky and to the golden disk we call the sun. And you need these certain minerals to tune into that rhythm. So it's almost like now we have an orchestra. We don't have just a guy up on the stage playing by himself. We've got horns, we got timbres, we got trumpets, we got saxes, we got drummers, we got singers, we got violins, cellos. They're all different notes, right? And all those different notes are ingrained into everything we know. We're literally walking rainbows, but a lot of people are not shining because they're not able to reflect anymore the light. And so, you know, that when people start eating these groceries, common day problems leave. You see it in the barnyard, right? You know, you get problems with delivery in the cows, or the cows lactating. All of a sudden you minimize, you're making the milk because the cow's getting the milk from the grass it's eating now, and then that nourishes the baby, and you're able to create herds of animals rather than always purchasing animals because you grow them right on the land. Yeah, so that's about it. So basically we got all expressions of geology here. We got sedimentary, both saltwater sedimentary and freshwater. We've got glaciation, minerals that were formed when the weight of the ice transmuted the parent material into new materials. That's when you get into metamorphosis, like the butterfly. It goes through different stages. And then we've got your volcanism, right? So your volcanism, really got the fire ingrained in the stone, the memory of fire, where your sedimentary's got the memory of water. So now you're getting that duality, that dance between the fire and the ice, and that creates reactions and complete cycles of things. Yeah, basically, that's about it for the deluxe mix, right? But you can custom blend all this to adapt it to certain soil profiles. We just got to look at the background geology or the history or a soil sample to determine what one would need. So you could custom design it. So some of these lands don't need some of these things, but they do need some of the other things. And without those other things, you don't see, you know, a thriving environment. it struggles like ourselves. When we don't get good food, mental disorders come, body problems come, and we get confused because the circuit isn't running its program. It's getting interrupted. The sequencing doesn't happen. And you got to remember, a lot of these stones here are made. We make our technology from some of these stones. It's just been refined. But yeah, your phone is all minerals that have been made into a circuit. And what it's dope with, there's more applications. So now we're understanding the mineral more, and we're able to create more smart devices. But again, it's the world that you walk it back, it all goes back to the rock. And some areas are very young geologically, so they haven't matured yet. It takes years for the area to mature. What happened through the colonization of the planet is we removed forests completely rather than leaving some. And it has a really hard time to start again when there's no elders for the little trees to admire. I'm going to be like you, Dad, when I get big, right? So, like our parents, as kids, we're always looking up at the big people, right? Because we know one day we're going to be there too, right? And through love and nourishment, we mature into healthy beings. Yeah. I don't have any of the potassium sand from up north here right now. I'm going to pick some up when I go up Tuesday to show Sandor the big piece of quartz he wants to put on his land. So I'll grab some then. But that's a potassium that's 14% potassium. So it's 14% potassium and the rest is silica. And the silica that's in there is piezoelectric. So now it has an inherent electrical charge in its grain structure that is activated through pressure. The pressure could be a lightning storm, the radio waves hitting the earth. It could be the freezing and thawing. It could be when the soil gets wet and when it dries down. And it creates all these reactions. And that potassium grows some of the nicest roses I've ever smelt because the rose really likes that one particular type of potassium. And there's 5 types out there. A lot of them have been used, the ones that we don't need, so they don't get the results. And then they get say, oh, I tried it, didn't work. That's where, we're developing a knowledge base now, and it's not just me, this is all from the 1800s. It's just that everybody got lazy. And we want to just visit the field once and then go harvest rather than be a caretaker of the land and observe what goes on in your land. A lot of farms I see when we go down on the ground, there is no signs of worms. And you heard Sandor say how much more worms he saw in that area that we were feeding. And when I originally did it, he said, well, we got lots of worms, but obviously a lot more worms have shown up, or evidence of it, holes of the worm. But it's not just a worm, there's the beetles too. And they all create tunnels. So when it rains, the water first goes into all those tunnels, then it collapses. But when you don't have that network of helpers, you're not, the water is not soaking into the area, it's just merely running over the area. So, so guys will get a good rainstorm, but see no result, no reaction in the field. Yeah. And again, lightning charges the water electromagnetically, so now it's more vibrant and more reactive. So when the rainwater falls from that stimulus, it excites the mineral, and then the mineral steps into the expression of the plant.